When AC World Expo called me last week to be a part of this webcast, I was frankly quite flattered and I felt very important about it. And I pretended to be quite nonchalant. I said, okay, I'll think about it. I'll go take a look at the website. And I did that. And I saw some of the speakers over there, and frankly, I was quite daunted by the people I saw. They were all very distinguished people, and they were talking about very, very important subjects. And for a moment, I thought, what can I possibly contribute to a forum such as this? And who on earth would be interested in listening to what I have to say for half an hour or so? So I decided to cheat a bit, and I said, let me change the subject of this talk from innovation and design to a subject which is very close to my heart, which is importance of the unimportant. Now, there are two reasons why I chose to do that. First reason, of course, was it's one of those catchy titles which pulls people in, like, the monk who sold his Ferrari and one of those kind of things. And the second reason was, of course, that as a person with a relatively unimportant job, I feel quite uniquely qualified in speaking on that particular subject. So here I am. So what is it that we do? My name is Ram Joshi, and I'm a partner here at Via Design, and our firm specializes in creating work environments. This is just a fancy way of saying that we design offices of all hues and shades for different kind of companies, large multinational Indian corporations. Now, this work is, of course, not that important in the sense of creating large infrastructure projects or creating technologies which help save the planet Earth. We create offices for folks who probably contribute a lot to India's GDP. So in that sense, our work might be at least peripherally important. So we are interior designers. And many times when I go out and meet kindly old folks, sometimes even unkindly and young folks also, and I introduce them myself and I say, I'm an interior designer. Well, they look at me quite noddingly and they say, right, interior decorator. And I say, no, hang on, it's not decorator, it's a designer. And they look right back and say, decorator. So I usually have some problems with that. We go back and forth a few times, and eventually I just give up, The point is, what is the difference between a decorator and a designer? Or to be very precise, what's the difference between design and decoration? I think design adds value, whereas probably decoration doesn't, and that's the difference really. And which is why we all prefer to be called designers rather than decorators. But having struggled with this whole design decoration kind of thing, I've chosen to introduce myself these days largely as an interior architect. That's the definition I use. Now, when I talk about design, I essentially talk from the perspective of our specific profession, which is interior design, and within that, the design of offices. I consider that as an art really of the unimportant, sometimes peripheral, sometimes things which are very, very, very minuscule. By that, I mean, as designers, we are quite concerned about things like that exact shade of fuchsia which has to go up on the walls, that precise location of the sprinkler that goes up on the ceilings. We are quite concerned about alignment of a few millimeters here and there. Because all these things go together in delivering the intent of a design, and they are very important from that perspective. Most of the time, designs are driven by quite important factors, but many times it is the peripheral things which start dictating the design. I'll talk about one of our recent projects where actually a very peripheral issue became central to the design and helped us come out with a solution which is quite exciting. Now I'm going to talk about one of our recent projects. We were commissioned to do a project last year by the German Center of Industry and Trade. And this is actually a joint venture between the German government and a few private banks. And what they do is they set up these incubation spaces for German businesses in a number of different locations across the world. There are 6 of such centers across the world, and the one in India came up last year. The brief was quite interesting because the client actually wanted quite a nice mix of Germanness and Indianness in this project. So we had to figure out a way to make sauerkraut work with curry, so to speak, on a single table. And the second reason why this project was also interesting was, although it was a large workspace of about 100,000 square feet, we really actually had to design only 30% or so of it, because the rest of it was just left as a raw shell with all the services in place so that the future tenants could just come and plug into these areas and start their offices. And we started our design exercise actually looking at the usual suspects, so to speak. We started focusing on the reception areas, the meeting spaces, the breakout spaces and things like that. And we found the client wasn't really getting excited about it. They just sit there and kind of nod about it. And we clearly saw that wasn't working. So we went back and brainstormed a bit, and then we realized the key to design actually lay and the corridors which actually go around the site completely. Now the Sambal corridor is something that we hadn't looked at all. Now, as you can see in this plan, the corridor actually runs around the entire periphery of the site, and we decided really to focus on this as a key design element. Usually in interior design projects and office design projects, we don't get a chance about concepts and things like that, but we did get a chance here and we went all the way for it. And we thought of these corridors really as a charbagh thing, with 4 courtyards at the 4 corners, as you can see in the plan over here. And these 4 courtyards became the focus of our design and really the visual axis that with these corridors would end. And we decided to characterize these 4 courtyards with 4 different colors. Now the idea here was that the main workspaces, which includes the work area, the meeting area, the reception and all the spaces, were designed to be very European in their design in terms of the color palettes, very, very slick and contemporary, as you can see in the slide over here. But the courtyards is where we decided to come out with very strong colors and therefore very Indian in its nature. You walk into it, it engulfs you. You can see those in those pictures here. The red coat actually symbolizes the deserts of the west. The blue coat symbolizes the waters of the south. The white symbolizes the mountains of the north. And the green certainly represents the paddy fields of the east. So this is how these 4 courtyards really work. You can see a transition in materials as you move into these spaces here. Suddenly from a white flooring you get onto a dark granite flooring. That's the symbolic of India. And we use that as a concept to build these spaces. We took this concept a little further up on one of the floors, where we actually took a straight line corridor. As you can see, this was earlier a straight line corridor. And we carved out of it a very sinuous, curvaceous, a sexy kind of a space. Clients, they were actually quite pleased with the whole project, the way it turned out and everything. The point I was trying to make here was the fact that sometimes in office design or in interior design for that matter, it's a very, very humble element which can lead you to a solution. Now, what is the challenge really that I think from a designer's perspective that is facing office design today? Offices in India so far have been about probably just 2 things as we look along in the past 10 years or so. Either it has been about utility, how to get maximum out of the space as an area or a workspace. On the other hand, it's probably just been about quite a lot about just creating a sense of wow, you know. And somewhat between these 2 people, there's one very important person that's been forgotten. And I think that's the unimportant office design that we're talking about. I'll come to that just in a minute. The 3 drivers today in office design are the 3 P's, as you call them. P's for planet, P's for people, and P's for profit. And typically we find that these 3 things pulls the design and the designer apart in 3 different directions. They are the exigencies of cost, which profit determines, and it pulls the design in one direction. There's the requirements of people, which pulls the design in another direction. Of course, the planet, how we ecologically conscious or sensitive, that pulls the design in another direction. I think the challenge for future offices, and that's the way we are moving forward, is to bring these all together and to make it work together as a single entity. And this is how it works, as you can see in this slide. These 3 things are working together. And in the middle of this, we put the I, the individual. Now, that's the unimportant person that everyone seems to have somehow, including us, forgotten about in office design. The individual or the person. Offices are occupied by people who run into hundreds and thousands of people occasionally, and we tend to lose the woods for the trees, so to speak. And we want to make our designs more people-centric. So that was my rather feeble attempt at putting the unimportant in the forefront. But I'm going to talk about another project over here, which is the offices for Nokia Siemens Networks, which we did last year. And this project is particularly interesting for us because it addresses 2 things actually. The collective, which is the larger identity of the organization, and balances it against the identity of the person or the individual. And there was a very fine mix of these 2 in this project, which is what makes it particularly interesting for us. NSN was an entity which was in the process of being formed when we were actually designing this premise. So there was Nokia on one side and Siemens on the other side, and these 2 entities